Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. 3 martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We wish we had great news to start off the week with, and we will have some good news a little bit later in today's podcast. But our first 2 martinis are going to deal with yet the latest example of violent, with deadly intent, anti-Semitic terrorism in the United States, this time in Boulder, Colorado. We'll get to the details of that in just a moment, but of course follows on the heels of multiple events around the country. So just kind of like on Friday, Jim, where we would have loved to have lighthearted stuff, the news cycle just refuses to let us have that fun, at least for now.
Sunday evening, I saw the news coming out of Russia and Ukraine and was like, I cannot wait to talk about this with Greg tomorrow morning. For people who know, we tape this before lunch. Unfortunately, events Sunday night intervened. Everything I had written and was ready to write for the morning jolt of Monday, I put in as a corner post. And in fact, one very sharp-eyed reader said, Jim, this reads like a morning jolt. And I was like, yeah, it's because it started that way. And then when, overtaken by events and still gets used, of course. But the events out of Colorado are just so horrifying. They had to be, front and center in the jolt and front and center on today's podcast.
Exactly. So we spread out the news as best we can, but let's talk first of all about a great new sponsor, and that is Caldera Lab. When it comes to skincare for guys, and some of us just like water, and we're pretty much good to go. Others need a little more care, but most of these products aren't really geared for men. Men are kind of an afterthought. Well, Caldera Lab is not like that. These are made just for men. It's high-performance skincare just for guys, simple, effective, and science-backed. In fact, in a consumer study, 100% saw smoother, healthier skin, and more than 90% noticed better hydration and a more youthful look because Caldera, they don't release a product unless it delivers.
This is an award-winning serum with 27 botanicals and powerful antioxidants, all designed to protect your skin against daily stressors. And who among us doesn't have some stress? Right. The eye serum targets dark circles, puffiness, and tired eyes with peptides and adaptogens. And the base layer is a lightweight moisturizer with plant stem cells and snow mushroom for deep hydration and a matte finish.
Skincare doesn't have to be complicated, but it should be good. So upgrade your routine with Caldera Lab and see the difference for yourself. Go to calderalab.com/3ml and use 3ml at checkout for 20% off your first order. Again, Caldera Lab, CalderalAlab.com/3ml and use 3ml at checkout. All right, Jim, as we alluded to in the open, and I'm guessing most of our audience is at least somewhat aware of, there was another anti-Semitic terror attack yesterday. This one was in Boulder, Colorado, and this is at an event. It's a weekly march where people who simply want the hostages to be released by Hamas, they gather. They're not loud. They're not chanting. There's no obnoxious signs. A few of them carry small Israeli flags. But yesterday, they were attacked. They were attacked by Molotov cocktails, for heaven's sake. As we'll get to in a little while, the media all over getting it wrong in terms of the details and then in the analysis. But here's what we know. Bill Malutian over at Fox News. 3 senior Homeland Security sources tell Fox News that the Boulder terror suspect is an Egyptian national in the U.S. illegally as a visa overstay who entered the U.S. during the Biden administration. I'm told Mohammed Sabri Soliman arrived at LAX on August 27th of 22 on a B1, B2 non-immigrant visa with an authorized stay through February 26, 2023, but he overstayed and never left. I'm told that on September 29th, 2022, he filed some sort of claim with USCIS, potentially an asylum claim, and on March 29th of 23, USCIS under the Biden administration gave him work authorization, which expired on March 28th, 2025. And so he's in the country illegally, just like the guy who shot the employees of the Israeli embassy here in Washington, D.C. And so the official yesterday, speaking for the FBI at the press conference, was a gentleman by the name of Mark Michalak. And here's how he summed up the event and how the FBI is proceeding.
I'm able to confirm there are 6 victims, ages 67 to 88. All of them have been transported to local hospitals. This attack happened at a regularly scheduled weekly peaceful event. Witnesses are reporting that the subject used a makeshift flamethrower and threw an incendiary device into the crowd. The suspect was heard to yell, "Free Palestine," during the attack. The subject has been identified as Mohammed Sabri Solomon, and he's 45 years old. The FBI is processing the crime scene and the subject vehicle and interviewing key witnesses. We're assisting Boulder Police in providing technical, analytic, and additional forensic resources. As a result of these preliminary facts, it is clear that this is a targeted act of violence, and the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism.
Solomon, according to ABC News, is also being held on $10 million bond, according to the Boulder County Jail, which listed a range of felonies against him, including use of an incendiary device. The posted list of felony charges also appeared to include first-degree murder, although no one's announced that any of these victims has died. Some folks are wondering whether it's going to be changed to attempted murder. But nonetheless, again, this follows on the heels of Washington, D.C. It follows on the heels of Governor Shapiro. It follows on the campus of Columbia and all these other schools. And so there's a big problem here that's been allowed to spiral out of control.
You know, Greg, there's a certain kind of naive, probably good-hearted, aghast liberal who looks at something like this and is genuinely shocked. Wow, how can this be happening, not just in America? How could this be happening in places that claim to be paragons of tolerance and how is this happening on the campus of Columbia? How is this happening in the streets of Washington, D.C. and Boulder, Colorado? I had a chance to go out there a couple of years ago. Lovely little city. Definitely one of those kind of new age, crystal waving. The most conservative guy there is Deion Sanders. It's, like this is, where the progressives in Colorado live. They're people are understandably shocked and aghast by that. And I came across this theory. I don't think it explains everything, but I think it is definitely a component of this. Every religion needs a devil figure. Every political movement needs a villain. Every political movement needs an enemy, somebody who can be the scapegoat for all of the problems and who they can turn people's anger against. The Emmanuel Goldstein, to use the example from 1984, right? So, and you look at a place like Boulder, Washington, D.C., the campus of Columbia, any blue city, there aren't any Republicans. There aren't any right-wingers. A very small number of them around to be at the source of all the problems. What these communities do have are Jews. And the argument is that for the typical angry young progressive, there aren't any Republicans around. So Jews will do. Congratulations, Jews. You are the scapegoat du jour of these people. It's nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do. They've just decided you are the enemy, and thus you must be punished for all the different reasons they're angry about the world. I don't believe it when these people say that they're anti-Zionist. No, they're anti-Semitic. You know why? Because the governor's mansion is not an IDF stronghold. A young couple leaving an event are not IDF commandos, right? This parade was not part of the Israeli embassy or anything like that. They keep saying, oh, I'm not really against all Jews. I'm just against Zionists, wink, wink. And then they end up going out and killing ordinary Jews. That I don't believe you. We should never believe these people. Greg, I was disturbed to learn that even within the Democratic Socialists of America, the largest communist organization in the United States, that there are groups within them who feel that the overall organization is too moderate, too nice, too soft. There's the DSA Liberation Caucus, and on May 27th, they said that the shooter of those two young people killed outside of the American Jewish Congress event was they should free Elias Rodriguez and all political prisoners. Got that? He went up to, shot her, killed the young man, shot the young woman. She was attempting to crawl away bleeding, and he went up and executed her, finished off the job. But in the minds of these people, he's a political prisoner. The only proper conclusion from this is that murder is part of their political agenda if they insist that he is a political prisoner. It works both ways. By the way, Rashida Tlaib is a member of the DSA. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got a conditional endorsement in 2024. Honest to God, apparently they said she was too soft on Israel. And they withdrew an endorsement of Texas Democratic Congressman Greg Cesar in 2022. This does not mean every Democrat is responsible for this. It does not mean that every progressive is responsible for this. But for a long time, this has been flourishing in the left. And there's always this most minute, hey, this isn't helpful. It's the most gentle criticism. Now, I'm foreshadowing our next martini. If this had been neo-Nazis who attempted to burn down the mansion of the Pennsylvania governor, if neo-Nazis had gunned down a young Jewish couple walking the street in Washington, D.C., if neo-Nazis had thrown Molotov cocktails and used a makeshift flamethrower on a parade arguing that they should release the hostages. By the way, 603 days they've been held hostage so far. We know the reaction would be completely different than it is right now. And we'll talk a bit more about that in our next Martini.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Josh Shapiro story alone would have been wall to wall for days, if not weeks. We'd still be talking about it and how whoever their political opponent is ultimately responsible for this. So, yeah, the media coverage we'll get to in just a second. In terms of the explanation here, first of all, I think Mamdani in New York is affiliated somehow with the Democratic Socialists. He certainly identifies as a socialist. And it kind of goes back to this indoctrination of if you are the more powerful entity, so Israel versus Hamas, Israel's got more firepower than Hamas, then you can't be the good guy. So they've got this whole matrix of race and class and powerful scope of the government. And so therefore, even though Hamas brought all of this on itself for what it did on October 7th, they have to be the victim because in the war that ensued, they're the ones with less firepower, which is absolutely absurd. But that's what they've been taught through this whole CRT and everything else that's been indoctrinated over the years. And so this is where they get it from. And the people who taught it to them are not doing anybody any favors because this is what it can lead to potentially. So maddening, absolutely maddening. All right. Much better news over at NetSuite. It's an interesting time for business. Tariffs and trade policies are dynamic. Supply chains are squeezed and cash flow, well, it's tighter than ever, but if your business can't adapt in real time, you're going to be in a world of hurt, and maybe you already are. You need total visibility from global shipments to tariff impacts to real-time cash flow. And where do you get help for all that? NetSuite by Oracle, your AI-powered business management suite, trusted now by more than 41,000 businesses. NetSuite is the #1 cloud ERP for many reasons. It brings accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one suite.
NetSuite gives you the visibility and control that you need to make quick decisions. And with real-time forecasting, you're peering into the future with actionable data. And with AI embedded throughout, you can automate a lot of those everyday tasks, letting your team stay strategic. NetSuite helps you know what's stuck, what's costing you, and how to pivot fast.
Yeah, there's so many small business experts out there that will tell you, just as they've told me, that there's so many things you have to keep on top of now. You've got to let tools, and especially great tools like NetSuite by Oracle, do some of that work for you and free yourself up to do what you do best. Let NetSuite by Oracle take care of this. And if I needed it, I would certainly use NetSuite by Oracle. If your revenues are at least in the 7 figures, download the free ebook, Navigating Global Trade, 3 Insights for Leaders at netsuite.com/martini. That's netsuite.com/martini. Well, we foreshadowed it a couple of times, Jim, so I'm guessing our listeners are pretty clear at this point that the media did not do an exemplary job in covering the terrorist attack in Boulder yesterday. And in fact, just the fact that the FBI guy called it a terrorist attack threw them into convulsions. But before we get to that, let's move over to MSNBC, who couldn't even identify the guy correctly.
As far as the investigation itself, we're still trying to verify and confirm some video, but it appears to show a significant portion of the incident as it happened. There's an individual that's taken into custody. He's a white male. Whether or not that's the person that police ultimately arrested and will ultimately charge in this crime, a bit of a question at this time, but that's just what we've seen so far.
Yeah, well, you got that wrong. Kind of light-skinned, I guess, but definitely not a white guy, although the media will turn you into a white guy whether you actually are or not. Look at George Zimmerman down in Florida with the white Hispanic, right? So then over at CNN.
I don't know about you, Greg. I'm just glad to see that white supremacists finally have an affirmative action program. And they're recruiting minority. Look, white supremacy isn't just for whites anymore. We believe in diversity. We want a white supremacy movement that looks like America, where everybody, no matter race, creed, or color, feels like they too can be a white supremacist.
It's a new day in America, I guess, that this is actually an option. But and so over at CNN, they brought on 2 intense Trump haters, Andrew McCabe, former deputy director of the FBI, who was fired by Jeff Sessions, and also Juliette Kayyem, who was an Obama DHS official. And they were just aghast that since the Boulder police guy didn't call it terrorism and the FBI guy did, that obviously the FBI is jumping the gun here, even though the facts are that this guy lobbed Molotov cocktails towards people who were involved in a quiet demonstration to release hostages and was yelling "Free Palestine." Doesn't take a rocket scientist, but apparently it does for Juliette Kayyem.
Police chief comes out and says, we don't have 2 + 2 = 4 yet. In other words, this is obviously an anti-Semitic attack and the victims were obviously part of that group. Therefore, we're not calling it terrorism. It adds a lot of it's not good for the community. It's not good for the potentially targeted community. It makes law enforcement look disorganized, and it makes the FBI look so juvenile. Like, why are you getting ahead of the police chief who says, I don't know what this is? It sounds, maybe it is what we all think it is, but maybe it's not. And he has no incentive to get it wrong. So we're going to take a step back, not be responsive to tweets by two heads of the FBI who don't have a long history in local law enforcement. And we will wait and hope it isn't what we all worry it is. And if it is, then there'll be an investigation. But that's like nothing I'd ever seen before. You normally, actually, Andrew knows this, you normally get the local people getting way ahead on motive and the FBI saying, we don't have it yet. You now have the opposite here. And until we know that the victims were members of that of the Jewish event, we don't have the nexus. And I will believe the Denver police chief that they do not have that nexus now. And if they do, I will be the first one out here saying that is a hate crime.
I think the facts are pretty clear here, Jim. But if there's any possible way we can change the subject and blame Trump and his team, we'll take it, is I guess the philosophy here.
Yeah, first on that audio clip, Greg, the Denver police chief.
I thought it was Boulder, but yeah, I know where you're going with this.
Like if you're gonna argue the FBI is making inaccurate statements, you probably should know which city. Now, they're not far apart. I think I took about an hour bus trip when I went from Denver, but that's nonetheless, and of course, slip of the tongue. But I'm just pointing out if you're arguing other people are making inaccurate statements or jumping the gun. Greg, you know how we can tell that President Trump has changed everything in America in just a few months in office?
How's that?
You and I are praising the FBI. And that's not just our diehard fanaticism. What other motive did McCabe and this woman envision was at work here? Robbery? Sexual jealousy? It was a crime of passion? This was, a lover's spat gone wrong? Let's say you didn't even know about the chanting Free Palestine. Let's assuming you don't know that this person is an Egyptian national who's in the country illegally. When a group of Jews get attacked, what do you think? Could this be some random nut job? I suppose. But it's kind of remarkable at that. And I'm thinking back to all the different times something terrible has happened. Something that all of us, we see it, and our gut reaction, particularly, post 9/11, like, oh my God, it's a terrorist attack. And the authorities go, well, let's not jump to any conclusions here. We don't know definitively that this is a terrorist attack. And then, after, days later, weeks later, they come out, hey, that when we, wagged our finger at you about jumping, it actually was terrorism. Your gut instinct was totally right from the beginning. I think probably the quintessential example of this, Omar Mateen, the impetus behind perhaps the all-time most popular segment we've ever done on this show, Disney CTU. Omar Mateen immediately, because it was a gay club that he was attacking, a lot of people said that this had to be driven by homophobia. There are even theories that it was driven by his own repressed homosexual desires and all of that stuff. Well, no, he pledged his life to ISIS, to the cops. They knew as it was going on what the motive was. And there was this adamant insistence, we just don't know what factors. It's like the cops well, we're going to put you down as unclear motivation. You can almost hear Mateen say, no, I'm doing this for ISIS. What do I need, a flag? Why are you not getting this? To this day, there are gay rights groups that insist upon characterizing the Pulse nightclub shooting as a attack driven by homophobia or animus towards gays, when I think it's pretty clear. Is ISIS homophobic? Yes, I will grant you that. I'll give you that one. But they're also anti-everybody else, too, in America. Anti-infidel, anti-anybody who doesn't live, including Muslims who don't live the ISIS way. They get killed as much as anybody else. So, there's this, I can't help but get the feeling that this, reflexive, let's not call it terrorism, is a spin attempt on the part of the authorities to muddy the waters because they're terrified of some sort of backlash against Muslims or backlash against this group or that group or something like that. In this case, from the moment a Jewish group gets attacked, my first instinct is going to be, this is probably anti-Semitism. And 99 times out of 100, it's going to be turning out to be right.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts here to wrap this one up. First of all, should have said it in the first one, but obviously we need to crack down on illegal immigration and go after the people who have overstayed, because just like the guy in D.C., This guy also shouldn't have been in the country at all. So you have more victims, once again, that shouldn't have been victims because this guy shouldn't have been here. And secondly, Juliette Kayyem saying it's not a terrorism attack unless all the victims are from the group. So if I'm just walking by and I happen to get set on fire by this Molotov cocktail, it's not still a terrorist attack based on his motives? That's crazy. All right, well, let's all take a deep breath. And for that, we need oxygen. And for that, you need Fast Growing Trees, the biggest online nursery in the United States with thousands of different plants and more than 2 million happy customers. That includes the Corumbus family, proud owners of their new snake plant. We love it. It looks great. We also have been very happy with our spice plants and the lemon plant and the big leafy plants and on and on and on. Plus, with Fast Growing Trees, you're supporting an American company that partners with American growers.
Greg, the next time I walk into your house, I'm going to say, snake plants. Why did it have to be snake plants? But you don't need a yard or a lot of space. You can grow lemon, avocado, olive, or fig trees inside your home, and that's on top of the wide variety of houseplants that are available. The experts at Fast Growing Trees curate thousands of plants so you can find the perfect fit for your specific climate, location, and needs. And you don't have to drive around to nurseries and big garden centers and make a big mess in the back of your car. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants will be delivered to your door in just a few days.
This spring, get up to 50% off select plants at fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. Plus, use the code Martini at checkout for an extra 15% off your first purchase. Visit fastgrowingtrees.com/martini and use the code Martini. Now is the perfect time to plant. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms do apply. fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our final martini, which is the good martini. Usually the good martini comes first, but given all the events in Boulder, it had to take a little bit of a back seat. But Ukraine has done some real damage to the Russians here. NBC News with the story. Let's hope they got this one more right than they got who was perp in Boulder. But it says it was a stunning, audacious attack whose widespread effects are only just becoming clear. Ukraine managed to smuggle 117 aerial drones on the backs of trucks that deposited them at the perimeter of 4 Russian air bases, one of them deep inside Siberia, some 2,500 miles from Ukraine's borders. While there are differing accounts on the extent of the ensuing damage of Sunday's spiderweb operation, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said 40 Russian aircraft, which means 34% of Russia's strategic cruise missile carriers, were hit. Ukraine's security service, the SBU, put the estimated cost to the Kremlin at $7 billion. Some folks are referring to it as Russia's Pearl Harbor. So, Jim, the Russians will never give us a accurate accounting of exactly the damage done here, but what you can glean so far from other sources, how significant is this and how does this change the status quo, if at all?
Oh, pretty darn significant. I saw one estimate saying this is 10 to 15% of all of the planes that Russia has that can carry nuclear weapons. Then I've heard others saying, well, actually, the total number, assuming that the Russian numbers are accurate, doesn't, it counts ones that are not necessarily ready to fly. So this may even be an even larger percentage of the planes that Russia would have to use in a circumstance like this. Some of these bases are 5 time zones away over in Siberia. Greg, I'm going to refer you to what people have said is a remarkably accurate depiction of the horrors of war. I refer, of course, to the 2013 film Olympus Has Fallen, which was another one of those Gerard Butlers playing a Secret Service agent. And in it, North Korea has decided to attack the White House, and they have a fake garbage truck. And it opens up, and there are bad guys with machine guns, and they're strafing the White House and all kinds of stuff like that. And you look at that, and you're like, yeah, like that could ever happen. Well, now we kind of have something like that. And Ukraine got not 1, not 2, but apparently a bunch of trucks all across Russia, outside the air bases. And by remote control, opened them up, launched the drones, and then at last count, they've destroyed 40 or damaged 41 planes. So there are new talks starting in Istanbul. Nobody really expects them to get anywhere. The Russian position is not just that they get all the territory that they currently have. Ukraine must disarm. NATO must promise that it's never going to expand. Never mind to Ukraine. NATO's never going to expand anywhere. And they want a pony. I think that was the last demand that they had in there. And Ukraine's like, no, we don't want to do that. We also want to give up any of our territory, and we're going to keep fighting until you guys give up. Now, look, it's going to be very hard to get to a ceasefire. In all 3 trips that I've taken there is no appetite for concessions amongst the Ukrainians. I do look at this stuff, though, and I do recognize the only way Putin will feel any real pressure to end the war is if he feels pressure from the elites in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Most of the guys who are going into the meat grinder of the war are from the outer provinces of the oblasts of Russia. And a bunch of these villages, people are dirt poor. And so if you're a young man, you enlist in the military, yeah, you get treated like crap. Yeah, the equipment you get is subpar. Yes, your commanders are threatening to shoot you if you don't advance. But if somehow you survive all that, you do your tour of duty, you come back, you get treated like a hero. You get huge bonuses, and it's vodka and parties. And yeah, everybody in your old village is thrilled to see you. You see you as a war hero. And you drink for like 8 months and party for 8 months, and then you go back for another one. And that's where Russia gets all of their soldiers. They're not, at least not the non-conscripts. It's good, and those people, they're never going to rise up. They're never going to object to the war. The elites in Moscow, the elites in St. Petersburg, they're not sending their kids into the front. Oh, heck no. This is, So, at all three trips, there's been this discussion of how do you get Russian elites to feel pressure from the war. And we've seen some drone attacks on Moscow. Listeners probably remember the footage of the drone that was above the Kremlin one night. Not a particularly big one, basically like a firecracker level explosive, but nonetheless, the idea that it could get above Red Square was this very visible symbol of Ukrainian determination. Well, if they can strike Russian military bases all over the country, and they can destroy 41 planes in one night, that sends a signal to Russians, you're not safe anywhere. We could have done this in Moscow. We can send these trucks with drones everywhere. And, for everybody's like, well, you can only do this trick once. Ukraine's going to find some other vehicle. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm starting to wonder if some things that I saw in my drone factory tours, I wonder if they played a factor in all this. Pretty interesting. Anyway, good for Ukrainians. Maybe this leads to a more just end towards the war. Just unbelievably innovative and probably coming soon to a theater near you.
A lot of big news at the beginning of the week, and we'll see what comes next. Hopefully much more good news tomorrow. Jim, have a good one.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about it as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. They are a huge help to us. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Monday. Join us again on Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.